right, we are now live. Welcome to the show, everyone. The DSA has lost some races. They've won quite a few primaries too, though, a worrying number, frankly. It should be 0. But a big portion of today's show is going to be looking at 3 major areas where the DSA has what they say are clear solutions to our problems, those being the cost of healthcare, the power that some companies have to rule our lives, and the failure of public infrastructure. And we are going to flesh out some counter proposals to their ideas, which are bad. And also, inflation is falling. Yay. But is it too soon to get the party poppers out? We will see. And for Unhinged, I really mean it. The DSA absolutely hates America foundationally, not just her economic system. All of this and more on episode 548 of the In the Tank podcast. All right, welcome to the In the Tank podcast. I am Linnea Lucan, your host, and as always, we have Chris Talgo, editorial director and socialism research fellow at the Heartland Institute, and Sam Karnick, senior fellow at the Heartland Institute and executive editor of Healthcare News. Sadly, Jim Lakely is on PTO this week, and so you will not get a Jim rant, and he cannot join us. But we are joined by special guest, our great intern Silas Centurion Pearson, who is quite worthy to join us on camera today and also quite welcome as well. So what's up, Silas?
I am so excited to be here. Very excited to get into these topics.
Awesome. Well, before we get started, if you want to support the show, you can go to heartland.org/inthetank and donate there. Please also click the thumbs up to like this video. And remember that sharing it helps to break through some of YouTube's suppression. Even just leaving a comment helps us out too. If you're an audio listener, you can help us out by leaving a nice review. All right. I'm going to jump right into Unhinged here, unless anybody has pressing matters that they want to bring up before the show starts. Anybody? Bueller? No? All right, great. Unhinged. So the DSA hates America. This is why we cannot let them win. Not just because their policies suck, but because someone who despises the foundations of our country should not be allowed to be in office. And so we have this video from one of the leadership of the DSA. This is the educational co-chair. And you got to hear what this guy has to say.
Must have a revolution. We cannot just lay hold to the United States as it exists and try to reform it into something better. That's like trying to turn a turd of shit into a bar of gold. It simply cannot happen. Anti-communism, anti-socialism, fascism is baked into the bones of this country. So it needs a hard surgery. We have to get rid of all this shit, and we have to unmake what currently exists and build the world anew. There's really no reason for police unions to exist, okay? That's like a pig union, like a union of animals that just, you know what? You should stop calling cops pigs. Pigs are smarter than cops. They're actually extremely intelligent animals. I feel guilty when I eat them. Replace the president and Supreme Court. Abolish the Senate, which is inherently undemocratic. And it was literally founded to fucking give more and more power to fucking slave owners. So yeah, every time you talk to somebody about politics or talk to somebody about DSA, you are advocating for this.
All right. Anyway, so that was nice. I want everybody to listen to this and then go and watch the video of AOC going on the news and saying that woke one was crazy, but she still supports these DSA candidates. Keep that in mind when someone tells you, oh, well, the left is backing down on wokeness and stuff. Obviously not. If they are still supporting these candidates with these views, they're not saying that woke one was actually crazy. What they're saying is that it was crazy that the American people reacted poorly to their very outward oops, there goes my phone. To their very outward social justice stuff. So guys, I mean, Gosh, I think they've won something like 38 primaries so far, the DSA candidates.
Well, that guy is just a total imbecile because he talks about anti-fascism and anti-socialism and anti-communism be baked into this country from the beginning, but those ideologies weren't even invented until 70 to 80 years after the Constitution was written and the Declaration of Independence was signed. So that guy needs to go brush up on his history. So, I mean, just take that into, just take that into account. Obviously, everything he says is, just ridiculous. And one of the things that I really don't understand is how can these people, these DSA candidates, be running for Senate and Congress, which means they have to take an oath to uphold the Constitution. However, they, within their rhetoric, want to undo the Constitution. So it just seems like they've got a major dilemma that they need to overcome here. Go start your own country. How about that?
Well, that's what they mean to do on our soil. And their loyalty to the Constitution is to a living Constitution, which they will alter as they see fit. So, well, it all makes sense. As G.K. Chesterton said, the madman is not the person who has lost his reason. He's the person who's lost everything but his reason. And so what happens here is that they have a vision of utopia that it simply erases everything else. There's nothing more important than moving everything toward the utopia. And so when you have that as your mindset, all reason, every argument has to lead in that direction. And it does. The difference between the man in our video and Ms. Hong in Milwaukee and other Democrats is just a matter of, I would say, honesty. They're more upfront about what they believe and what their ultimate intentions are, and the others are more Fabian about it. If you remember the movement of Fabian socialism in the early 20th century, the idea was that, well, we'll do it a little bit at a time, and eventually we'll have the full socialist state, or what they really intended was a communist state, but they would do it a little bit at a time instead of a revolution. The little bit at a time doesn't really get you all the way there. At some point, there has to be blood, and there always is if it's not defeated before that.
And Silas, you were in college much more recently than I was, but when I was in college, it was like peak class, like let's call it woke one, right? Like classic woke. We had Turning Point USA, and college Republicans were getting Dennis Prager to speak on my campus. And there was a girl who worked for the student union, or she was like the student union leader or whatever. And she protested Dennis Prager by saying that he was an anti-Semite and shouldn't be allowed on campus. Like just crazy.
Those darn Jewish anti-Semites.
Yeah, it was the years of like the Triggly Puff and all that stuff. We look back on that with kind of like they're like the halcyon ancient days when it was all fun and games, and they'll grow out of it once they get out of college. Well, they're out of college now.
Yeah, no, to piggyback off of what Sam said, I think this really just brings into question, when is treason actually going to be held accountable? And I think, and for many people, the term treason gets thrown around like it's only for the 18th century, and we shouldn't be talking about that. And it's too extreme of a term to be used. But like we said, this is just antithetical to the Constitution that they swore to uphold and to protect. And so it is just an insane. And yeah, as a college student, thankfully I went to Liberty University, so one of the most conservative schools in the country. And we didn't really have to deal with that on campus. We had pockets of, I guess, left-leaning people, people that would probably maybe align themselves somewhat with DSA on certain issues. So I didn't have firsthand interaction with the communists of college campuses in 2026. But I did get the opportunity to work with Turning Point and went to some of their conferences, had counter protesters, talked with Charlie Kirk before he died. Really awesome opportunities like that, and getting those were the opportunities where I got to see it firsthand and just how insane it is. And right now for DSA, their median age is 33 for their members, and that's over the 100,000 people or so. But I don't know how many people know this, but DSA actually has a youth organization, YDSA, which has 150 chapters across the country in high schools and on college campuses, and that's roughly about 3,000 members or so. So that is at least kind of my jumble of opinion on just how insane it is and how it's spreading like wildfire. And we'll talk about it later, but my biggest belief is that it starts, good and bad, both starts and ends in the education system. And so seeing young people being infested with this ideology so young is just insane.
As a former history teacher, I can definitely attest to that.
Absolutely. I was going to say Chris is definitely the one to talk about that. Well, I wanted to point this out, especially because the DSA in particular, and especially some of their inner caucuses that are like explicit Leninist, Maoist caucuses that they have are we keep saying this is crazy, this is crazy. Well, we kind of were asleep at the wheel for a long time about this stuff. And one of the things that I'm going to point out in our section on, why socialism fails and what our counter proposals are to their proposals is that for the longest time, I think the right and like libertarians have done a really poor job of selling why socialism is bad. And so it's going to take a reformatting or a reframing of those, the good ideas that are actually, promotion of economic prosperity and being able to, help people to survive on their own 2 feet instead of having the government have to come in and take over everything. Those things are correct and good, but they can sometimes sound a bit pale when young adults have been told for the last several decades by the majority of the media that we do live under, like a capitalist society or whatever. And then they're looking around, they're saying, well, this isn't going very well for me. So therefore capitalism must be the problem. And so we have to go to socialism instead. They're wrong, but it was kind of our job to articulate that. And I think the like Fox News crowd and stuff, not to be too mean to Fox News, because they were at the forefront of pushing back on a lot of leftist craziness for a long time. But we kind of didn't do a very good job of pushing back at a broader scale in a way that appealed to the young people who are, obviously, like Silas pointed out, if the median age is 33, that's a bunch of millennials then. That's my generation and some Gen Zers that are the DSA. And so yeah, it's quite difficult.
But this is, I think, a very important point to make, and we're going to talk about their agenda, their program later. Hating America and having a socialist agenda are two different things.
Yeah.
And that's very important because we know for a fact that socialism has failed in every single iteration it has been tried. So you've got to just be, extremely gullible or naive to think that socialism can work here in America. But on top of that, I have read every single word of their program, and there's a lot of hatred, not just hatred towards America, hatred towards Israel, hatred towards success, hatred towards wealth creation. It's a lot of hatred. It's a grievance ideology. It's all bent on oppressor, oppressed, victim, victimizer. That is not what America's about. America's the land of opportunity. America's the place where you can go, and if left to your own devices, you can make whatever you want to make of your life. They reject that in full. That's a very important point to keep in mind. Aside, this is totally separate from the fact that their policies have failed in utterly every single place that they have been tried.
That's such a great point, Chris, because it's one thing to be just wrong about what your economic fixes would be, or like your system would be. It's another thing completely to be this guy saying like this country is fascist to its core. Not that he even knows what fascism means, but this country is fascist. It's evil. It cannot be reformed. It needs to be torn to shreds, and we need to build something completely different on top. That stuff is the kind of thing that I think is what we really need to be keeping an eye on. And the fact that, my point of bringing this up alongside talking about what AOC said and what kind of went viral a little bit, I forgot to put the video in the chat so we could have it for this, but she was talking about how, I'm so excited about these new candidates who are winning and like democratic socialists and blah, blah, blah. And then, and that's this guy, right? This guy is a chairperson, a co-chair for the DSA. And meanwhile, AOC is saying at the same time, oh, well, woke, when we were saying like defund the police or whatever, that was crazy, wasn't it? Well, that was so silly. We were having a silly time because everyone was stressed out because of COVID. But we didn't really mean that. We were just experimenting with rhetoric and stuff. And it's like, no, we know full well that you still intend for this stuff to go forward. You like one of the DSA's policy positions is not just defund the police, but abolish the police and abolish prisons. So she is supporting candidates who are even more extreme than the stuff that Woke One was talking about.
It seems to me that her big beef with Woke One was how upfront and frank they were, and that now she's saying you guys are making that mistake again by putting this in our Workers Deserve More platform so that we can be ridiculed and mocked for it. I think that AOC actually does have her eyes on 2028 presidential ambitions, and I think that she's saying, we got to keep this on the down low. Don't say defund the police. Don't say abolish the police. Say we want to change how communities are, safety protocols or something like that. I think it's all about semantics. I think it's all about, yeah, exactly. And I think that the common denominator here is that AOC, who was born in the United States, she should be so grateful for that, just divine luck that, was bestowed upon her. Instead wants to take America and, burn it down and make us, I guess, like the Soviet Union was in the late 80s. Like, I mean, okay, that doesn't sound like a great idea to me, but that's apparently what she wants to do.
Yeah,
we can all be happy, comrades.
Yeah, there are some real monsters in the DSA. I've seen some people who are DSA supporters, at least. I'm not sure if they were actually involved in the caucuses, but who said things like defending the slaughter of the Romanov children, because they said even if they grew up, like the fact that they had those parents and those opportunities in young life, they learned enough by the time that they were young, children, that they'd be able to carry those successful habits into life later. And that's not fair. So it's good that they were killed. Like that kind of perspective, like straight up, we call them tankies or worse, straight up people who are apologists for the mass murders and the evil of previous communist regimes and current communist regimes. Like Hassan Piker outright, he doubles down when people try to get him to denounce the CCP. No, he thinks the Chinese Communist Party is a great thing. So I can't believe we have to talk about Hassan Piker in like legitimate
sometimes I wonder if
politics
he really thinks that, or if he just says that because he knows it's going to get a lot of clicks. I'll just throw that out there.
Oh, I think he means it because he's dumb as a stack of bricks. But
no question about that. I don't think that we're going to win any arguments, frankly, in the big picture, in the big long run of things, by saying, well, you'll get 0.5% less GDP if you have your socialism light or whatever. We're not going to win that. And AOC is actually doing the smart thing. Regardless of her motives, what she's doing is turning the discussion back to where the left feels very comfortable, which is the moral presentation, the moral claims. The moral claim is that there are people out there that are suffering and they need help, and somebody's got to do it. And then their factual claim is that the private sector, private charity, cannot do it. The government will do it. Now, we know that, in fact, the very opposite is true. But we don't win by saying, well, that's not going to work. No, what we win by doing is saying, yes, we understand. And here is how we are fixing it. And in fact, we're already fixing it. We'll be talking a little bit about some of that during the rest of the show.
Yeah.
But it's in the process of getting fixed. We need to relax a little bit and not worry so much about today and be good reformers, conservative style reformers, traditionalist reformers, and worry about the long term and the big picture, and not worry about it. Keep our eyes on the long term and the big picture, because the winning is on our side. All we have to do is embrace it, and we'll be talking about that.
I think, Sam, I at least from most of Gen Z's perspective, or at least the people that I talk to, that perspective, while yes, we can certainly stand on going, we have the truth and thus we will always be right. But the issue is that we're seeing a mass exodus away from conservatism by young people, or maybe not conservatism, but at least away from the Republican Party and away from a lot of the conservative side of things, because young people are getting so annoyed with, I mean, the GOP currently has the presidency, the Congress, as well as a lean on the Supreme Court, yet things are not actually being done. And so young people that I talk to, that I'm friends with, are getting so frustrated because they're saying, we have the power here, but nobody's willing to do anything about it. And so we can say, okay, let's not rush things. Let's not get too crazy. Let's look for tomorrow. But the issue is that the left and DSA, these crazy people, are taking control today, and they're cutting us down at the knees, where I don't think we're going to have the opportunity in 5, 10, 15 years from now. I have a great concern from, when I'm in my 30s to 40s, what is the United States going to look like if these people are not stopped now? And so I'm also try to be a very principled person. I'm not one to try and rush in guns blazing, but I don't really believe in as patient a perspective as that. And I think most young people in the political sphere are not looking for a patient 5-step plan. It's more so, we need to make changes now and utilize the positions of power that we are holding at this moment, if that makes sense.
I agree with you, Silas, but what we really have to do is we have to make those changes several months ago and a year and a half ago, and they have been made. The results are coming, as you will see.
Well, and also a lot of these
2 months out. We're 2 months out from the election.
A lot of these problems have been festering for decades, and you cannot solve them in a 2-year period, a 4-year period, or even a 10-year period. It's going to take some major sacrifices, and it's going to take some major willpower on behalf of the American people to say, we're going to elect politicians who are going to do what we want them to do and hold them accountable. Because a lot of the Republicans right now, they were supposed to go in there and solve some of these problems, and they have not done that. So I never put any faith at all in a politician, because they're humans and they're fallible. I don't even put faith in a political party. I put faith in principles that have been proven to work. And generally speaking, libertarian economics is the fairest, most sure way that everyone in this country is going to have the opportunity to succeed and thrive.
Well, let's take a look at some of the early signs that we might potentially be getting a little bit better in our economic position, at least. So from Breitbart here, inflation fell further in July as prescription drugs, gasoline, and grocery prices decline. The consumer price index rose 0.1% compared with June, the Department of Labor said Wednesday. Compared with a year ago, the consumer price index is up 3.4%. That matched the consensus forecast. In June, prices fell 0.4%, while the CPI was up 3.5% from a year ago. Core prices, a measure that excludes volatile food and energy costs, rose 0.2% compared with the previous month. And for the year, core prices are up 2.5%, a decline in year-over-year inflation from the previous month's 2.6%. So goods prices fell 0.2%, second consecutive monthly decline. Excluding food and beverages, goods prices dropped 0.4%. Services rose 0.2%, following a flat June, and grocery prices declined in July. So we can go on and on. The index for shelter and stuff rose a bit. It's kind of all over the place, but all right. Sam, all of these numbers like feel really small. They're talking about like, okay, grocery prices declined 0.1%. Yeah, gee, great. I certainly haven't noticed that change in my grocery bill. So what's going on here?
Well, as our regular listeners will recall, I've been pointing out that the prices are never going to go back down. That's not how inflation works. You can get a long-term deflation, but that is simply built by having more productive production of goods and services, more efficient production of goods and services. So, but let's get to the news on it. 0.1% in a month. That's 1.2% inflation. How we got here was 9+% inflation during the Biden administration. So that all those prices went up, and they continued to go up even during the early months of the Trump administration. Then they started to dial back a bit. They started to go up again with the Iran situation and the higher fuel prices. So I suppose pretty much everybody knows all that. But the point is, what do the fundamentals say? And the fundamentals show that the government spending, which is the cause of inflation, is excessive federal government spending, and in particular, deficit spending. So given that, the government spending increases have slowed. It's still going up, and that's a terrible thing. As you know, I've said many times we should go back to the 2019 pre-pandemic government spending numbers, and it would solve all our problems. There would be a lot of protest about that because many people would lose privileges. But, well, that's just too bad if you want to save the country. Maybe some people don't want that. However, the point is that we have whipped inflation. It's going down. It's going to continue going down, provided we don't increase government spending radically within the next 2 months. And we can't, because there's a lag time in that. It takes a year, 2 years. It takes at least 18 months for anything the Federal Reserve does, and at least 2 years for what the federal government does. So we can't we can't go back in the past and raise spending faster than we already did. So we're good to go for at least a little while. So as long as we hold the line on federal spending, inflation will continue to decrease. There's nothing stopping that. And there's nothing that can stop it except increasing spending. So we're in good shape there. Now, and that's why I keep saying, don't worry about November. Don't worry about those elections in terms of the affordability and inflation issues. They're decreasing. The effects are decreasing. Now, in fact, we're having a very noticeable deflation in housing prices, and that's going to continue. It's not going to continue just for a year or 2 years. It's going to continue with bumps up and down for a couple of decades. Literally a couple of decades. We have been in a long-term problem that was turned into a short-term crisis by the spending of 2021 and 2022. It was turned into a short-term crisis. By short-term, I mean 5-6 years. But we had a long-term problem, which was caused by an incredible increase in population in this country over literally decades, 3 to 5 decades, however you want to measure it, and suppression of the growth of the housing stock. Now, look, The baby boom generation is about to leave the stage, as it were. Those houses are going to be added to the housing market as smaller cohorts of people are there to occupy them. That's going to push prices down long term. So Silas is right. You can't just solve short-term political problems with promises of long-term gain. But you can solve short-term political problems with success in short-term economic gains, which is what's happening now. You're not all seeing it just yet, but it is happening. And as you know, I've been writing about this and stating this for quite some time, that it's all going to play out and things are getting cleaned up. The nice thing here is that what the Trump administration has done, even without Congress, in fact, they did get Congress. They did get one big thing from Congress, the one big beautiful bill. It kept the it staved off a huge tax increase. Okay, so that was a big thing. But other things that the Trump administration has done to deregulate the economy have stimulated growth. Kevin Warsh being the new chairman of the Federal Reserve, that's going to stimulate growth because he is holding the line on the money supply. These are all great things. Things are going to continue to get better and better. Let's just hope 2028 isn't anything like 2020, where there's a sort of a little surprise that blows everything up.
At 3 a.m.
So that's my counterintuitive and contrarian point of view on this thing. But I've been consistent about it, and when the results start to come, we have to acknowledge that yes, this is happening. 1.2% annual inflation right now. Man, that's pretty good, isn't it?
Certainly is good comparatively. Chris, did you have anything to add on this?
Yeah. So at this point in Joe Biden's presidency, the rate of inflation was 8.5%. So like Sam said, I mean, we definitely are on a better trajectory. However, I still am extremely worried about long-term spending. The national debt's about to eclipse $40 trillion. We've got $2 trillion federal budget deficits for the next decade. There seems to be zero appetite in Congress to cut spending. Unfortunately, DOGE, I think, did not really do all it could have done. I'm not blaming Elon. I'm not blaming Trump. I'm blaming Congress, because a lot of this stuff, to really get these spending cuts in place, you need Congress. You need laws. And there just seems to be almost zero appetite among Congress to actually rein in spending. So, if the definition of inflation is too many dollars chasing too few goods and services, like Sam said, you can actually increase productivity, which I think AI will do, which will increase total goods and services in the economy. And maybe that will have a deflationary effect. But I still think that we need to get our fiscal house in order. I think the United States federal government really needs to actually balance its budget. Hasn't done it in 27 years now. And unless that happens, I think that we're setting ourselves up for a very, very bad debt bomb at some point. And people have been talking about this debt bomb since Paul Ryan, 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12. Well, eventually the debt bomb will explode, and we just keep putting it off. We just keep borrowing. We just keep printing money, and that cannot last forever, and it's going to get ugly. So I hope the faster we start to take common sense measures now, the better it will be. But the more we just keep kicking that can down the road, which is what a lot of, I think, Americans want to do, because they don't want to maybe face the financial cuts that might make their lives a little bit tougher, then we're going to have to, deal with this, in the future, and it's going to just be worse and worse and worse. And then just, adding to it, when the DSA says they want to get Medicare for all, the Green New Deal, and all these spending, priorities, we can't afford them. So I don't understand how in the world they can say, let's actually quadruple the federal budget. So, I mean, of course they say, well, let's just go, tax millionaires and billionaires. But if you literally confiscated every penny of everything they have, you wouldn't even pay for any of this stuff. So good luck with that. Money printing.
You serious?
Modern monetary theory. Deficits don't matter.
All right. We will definitely.
Good enough?
What was that?
Is that enough? I mean, I can go.
No, no, you have to save it actually, because we do talk about this a little bit more here. I wanted to say too, though, a lot of Americans, it turns out, live on very slim margins. Most Americans live paycheck to paycheck, which is not good. So these little changes, in overall prices and inflation can impact your budget pretty severely, and it makes it hard to save when inflation is eating that budget. So one of the early things you learn if you watch like financial advice YouTube and stuff is to pay yourself first when you get a paycheck. That doesn't mean buy what you like first and blow your money on eating out and stuff, sadly. Sorry, Andy, no Uber Eats for you when you get paid on Friday. But, you should be paying your rent and stuff first, yes. But before you spend your money on fun stuff, you should pay your future self first by putting a small percentage of your income into some kind of savings or investment. And speaking of investments, Ira Bershadsky, who you guys all know is the managing member of our sponsor, Advisor Metals, says that historically gold performs its best in September and January when the stock market is lower in September and October. You can look at his blog posts at advisormetals.com/blogs, where he frequently posts about what metal prices are up to. So he likes to inform his customers and also anybody who just happens across his website. So now is a good time to invest, is what I'm saying. And, at In the Tank, we trust Advisor Metals specifically because we know that Ira Bershadsky is the best of the best. He's the only person in the physical precious metals industry who has the Commodities Futures Trading Commission federal registration. The only one. But what does all that mean for you? Well, it means that it means that everything that Ira or a member of his team says to you has to be 100% factual. So there's no sketchy little sales pitch or bait and switch or anything. Ira is held to the highest ethical standards, and there's full transparency, which is way too lacking in other places nowadays. If you want to diversify your investment portfolio and your savings, if you're planning for retirement and are concerned about economic uncertainty, if you want a tangible asset that is easy to buy and sell, you can secure your assets with a wide range of physical precious metals by getting in touch with our friend Ira at Advisor Metals. He will make it very easy for you. So please visit climaterealismshow.com/metals, and you can leave your information for Ira and get started with investing in precious metals and expand your current portfolio. Go to climaterealismshow.com/metals. And when you talk to Ira, make sure you let him know who sent you. That helps us while you're helping secure your financial future by diversifying with precious metals from Advisor Metals. Thank you very much, Ira, and thank you to our audience as well. So, and this was a cheeky little transition here, but it also is totally true, especially in times of economic hardship. Paying yourself, your future self first, is going to help you out, even if right now it feels kind of not so good when you say, no, I guess I won't buy that purse. Darn.
Long-term thinking is good, huh?
Well, and long-term thinking is good. I will say sometimes the rhetoric and stuff around what my generation and what younger generations are like spending their money on can get a little bit crazy. Sorry, Andy, no purse for you. I think last week there was this whole thing about like people were saying that like Gen Zers are unreasonably upset because a Chipotle burrito is a lot more expensive than it used to be. And there's correct commentary on both sides. One, the Chipotle burrito is stupid expensive. And two, if it's outside of your budget, you shouldn't be buying the Chipotle burrito, and you can make it better at home anyway. But they're both valid commentaries. But the generational divide just has gotten a little bit out of control on these commentaries.
They're just not maximizing the opportunity. You got to get the quadruple rice and the extra beans, all free. you can max that thing out. Trust me.
Yeah, you can turn one Chipotle burrito into 3 meals, probably.
I remember back in the day when a Subway footlong was only $5. Man, those were
Yeah.
the good old days.
Absolutely.
I might be Heartland's resident Gen Zer, but I do remember the jingle. I'm old enough to remember that. Yeah.
Very good. Just we're all showing our age on this show. All right, so we're gonna get into our main topic here, which is just on the Democratic Socialist America, their proposals and why they suck. So there was a great post that was restacked, I think it's called, by you, Sam, on your Substack, Life, Liberty, Property. The post is "There is no such thing as socialism" by Larry Sand, which sounds very inflammatory and very crazy to our audience, to everybody who has dealt with socialists and socialism. But here's his argument about this. He argues that there's no such thing as socialism because there is only early stage communism. He writes, in 1916, education reformer John Dewey began articulating what we now call social justice. At the same time, Antonio Gramsci, an Italian Marxist, emerged on the scene. He believed that spreading revolutionary ideology slowly and incrementally was most effective. His approach eventually became known as the Long March Through the Institutions. In 1923, a group of professors known as the Frankfurt School came to prominence. These German Marxists harbored a deep disdain for capitalism and traditional morals. Unfortunately, they did not remain in their homeland for long. Adolf Hitler's rise to power forced them to leave Germany, and they reemerged at Columbia University in New York City in 1935. The Democratic Socialists of America traces its origins to the early 1970s, and like all left-wing radical groups, the DSA has a get 'em while they're young mentality, and accordingly, the organization has indeed invaded our schools. According to Defending Education, publicly available information and documents show DSA supporters have infiltrated every level of K-12 schools. Importantly, socialism is typically not the far left's final step. According to classical Marxist theory, socialism is a transitional phase between capitalism and communism. Socialism entails state control of the economy to redistribute wealth, whereas communism envisions a final stateless, classless utopia. And recent polling suggests we are moving in that direction. A Cato Institute survey conducted in late June reveals that members of Gen Z, those born between 1997 and 2012, hold mixed views of communism, with 37% having a very or somewhat favorable view, and 37% having a very or somewhat unfavorable view. So this is stuff we've seen from Heartland polling as well. But I think it's important to note that support for socialism and communism didn't come out of nowhere. And it wouldn't have popped up probably in popularity again if things felt good economically and socially to young adults. So we've got problems. Anybody who's avoided going to the doctor for pain or, worrying symptoms or whatever for as long as possible because they're more scared of the bill than they are of like the physical suffering knows this. That's very, very common. We on this panel know that government is actually responsible for the high price of medical care, but the solutions that the DSA proposes have the benefit of being really blunt and obvious. So, medical care is too expensive. The government should pay for it. Big companies like Google have extraordinary power over our lives. The DSA says nationalize it. Our public infrastructure is falling apart. Public transportation sucks. Bridges are literally crumbling. And the DSA says raise taxes on the rich. It's not like they can't afford it. But people like us on this panel and many of our viewers who grew up in an economic ecosystem where we were actually pretty well educated on economics and government interference, we often scoff at people when they don't get it. But as fun as it is to be patting ourselves on the back for being so smart, if the right and conservatives and libertarians really were smart, we wouldn't be losing this argument, right? We'd be using arguments that worked on people outside of our policy think tank bubble, right? So that's what I'm worried about. I'm not, and this isn't about criticizing policy think tanks, obviously, but the whole conservative political ecosystem, right? This is what I'm worried about. You can have the best and the most correct policy in the world, but it doesn't mean anything. It may as well be clown policy if you don't win at politics. you can have the best product in the world, but it might as well go in the trash if no one will buy it, right? So those issues that I listed before, medical care for all, nationalization of industry, eat the rich, those are all really simple solutions that are easy to wrap your head around.
No
So
offense, but it sounds like some fucking commie gobbledygook.
And indeed it is. Commie gobbledygook. But what are our counter proposals, and how do you sell these things to people? So Chris, starting with Medicare, we say medical care is really expensive. It sucks. It's not fun. People, I mean, I know this for my own case. Like, if I'm in pain from something, I'm waiting until it's the absolute worst that it could possibly be. Like, I'm actually afraid of real lasting harm before I'll go to the hospital, which probably isn't good, just in case it's like a heart attack or something someday, like it's not a good thing. But and so the DSA's solution is, well, we'll just pay for it so that everybody can have medical care. Why doesn't that work? And what's our counter proposal?
Okay, when I was a teacher and we talked about socialism and communism, I taught European history, American history, and government. I one of the most effective ways for me to make them understand it was to say, okay, from now forward, no matter how good you do on your homework, no matter how well you do on the test or the quiz, everyone just gets a C. And here's what would happen: the A+ students and the B+ students that's so unfair. Why should I, work any harder? But then the ones who didn't want to work hard, the the D students and the F students, they were like, yeah, that actually sounds pretty good. So I think that is a really good microcosm of socialism and the corrosive effects it has on an entire society. We are not all equal. We all don't have the same amount of work ethic, the same amount of ambition, the same amount of smarts, whatever, intelligence, whatever it is, the same amount of luck. And to say that we're going to create this society in which everyone has the same materialistic outcomes is a farce, because it's not only does it defy, the laws of, mankind of, we want to own our property, and we want to be self-reliant. We want to, have agency. We want to have, autonomy. It takes all that and says, no, put all that aside. We're going to guarantee that you're going to get all this free stuff, which is not actually free, because you said the government pays for it. The government doesn't pay for anything. The government just compensates taxes from people and then redistributes to other people. And that's what this is really all about. I think that one of the reasons why so many people, so many young people in particular, are buying into this socialist, utopia from the DSA is because they have not, unfortunately, I think they have not been held to account, and they have never had to actually face, consequences in their life. I've talked about this for years. Everybody gets a trophy thing. I think that has had a very corrosive effect on the work ethic, on the mentality of a lot of younger people, and that's why I think they are kind of falling for socialism. I think this is a multifaceted problem. You can't just say it's all the school's fault. What about the parents? What role do the parents play? How about society? How about celebrities? How about Hollywood? How about social media? Instead of saying you should just try to get as much as you can out of the system, why aren't they saying, like JFK said, why don't you try to put into the system? So these are all just, I'm kind of going, ad hoc here, but these are just all the things that have been floating through my mind the past 15 years of when I started teaching and understanding why so many young people feel this way. And unfortunately, it hasn't gotten better. It's gotten worse. So I think we've got a very uphill battle that we're facing here.
Yeah.
Part of the problem.
Yeah, go ahead, Silas. Sorry.
I would say part of the problem is that, like you said, Chris, society has been teaching, especially younger people, my generation, been telling them since they can remember that we have to be more vigilant about emotion and how we feel and how how does everything around you make you feel, disregarding reality or what is actually going to happen to everybody else? And you said, I 100% agree. It is the parents. It's not just the school system. It's parents not being involved and not actually teaching their children values. I, as a young person, I'm going to sound like I'm trying to be an older person, but when we hand children off to the TV or to an iPad for parenting, that's an issue because they're no longer being taught values. I was homeschooled most of my life. I thank my mother on a very regular basis for making sacrifices and being willing to do that, because I think it put me in a much better position than those that are constantly just handed off to a screen. But part of it, and I experienced this when I was in high school, even somewhat in college, most young people are so heavily dependent on anecdotal evidence that they go, well, like you said, you said that a lot of young people have not had to face the consequences, have not had to go through these hardships. Well, that's where I think most of these young socialists come from, is they go, well, because I didn't have everything, or because I did go through a struggle and something that could be minuscule compared to others, or maybe it was a huge thing. But regardless, they go, well, I went through this, and thus we should implement socialism, and I should be given free stuff, and this should be how it is for everyone. And you see that in almost every left-wing talking point. You're talking about immigration. Well, they just want a better life, disregarding the women and children being raped and killed in the streets. It is this perpetual culture of me, and how I feel must dictate how everyone else acts, disregarding the fact that if you have millions of people with all of that same philosophy, who gets to be on top? It's going to be these politicians that are manipulating everyone.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Well, and I was trying to think leading up to this of like what, because the one of the benefits of the DSA's platform is that they have pretty good like bumper sticker level stuff that they can hit you with. Medicare for all is easy. You get it, what they're pitching there. And I was thinking, what would Sam Karnick say as our bumper sticker slogan for fixing the medical care industry? And the thing that popped into my head was get government out of it. But then I thought of the counter to that, which I think that the reason why our slogans don't quite work is because they don't have enough pessimism built in, or we're not addressing the priors that they are working off of, or that they've managed to convince people of, which is that, people feel that these companies or like the hospitals and stuff are evil and will take advantage of them. So the idea of get government out of it scares them, because then it's like, well, then, the prices can be whatever the hospital wants and it's going to suck. And Sam, how do we counter that counter?
Yeah, you've hit the important question here. It's the difference between politics and policy. In order to get good policy, you have to win in political terms, and then you have to execute, that's the place where Republicans tend to fail. And they fail because they are conservative. You have to perceive yourself as a reformer. You have to perceive your country as having failed over the past 100 years, which is it has done in many, many ways. Our government has failed us repeatedly. And we need to recognize that and acknowledge it and say, no, we don't want to conserve that. It's the other side that wants to conserve that. Those people who tell you that the government will take care of you, they're lying. The government will exploit you just as it has always done. So there's arguments to be made, and you can make bumper stickers based on our premises just as well as, if not better, than you can based on the pro-government premises.
Well, but
I think there's a little bit more to this, which is that psychologically, the people building the delusion have an advantage. In the psych wars here, the info wars, whatever you want to call them, it's asymmetrical warfare. It's asymmetrical. The one side perceives it has to defend a current system. the other side has the advantage of saying, well, that stinks. Let's fix it by X. We need to acknowledge that the current system stinks. We need to acknowledge that. We need to press forward with that insight and say the way to better this nation is not to imitate the EU, and certainly not to imitate communist China, war-torn Cambodia, and the Soviet Union. That's not the way to do it. The way to do it is to do what Milei has done in Argentina and what other Latin American leaders are doing in their countries now as they turn back away from totalitarianism. So what we need to do is say, look, there are only two points of view here. There is the belief in individual rights to life, liberty, property, and then there's collectivism. There's nothing in between. That's what the point that Larry Sand was making, is that once you go down that path, once you eliminate the respect for individual rights, you've only got collectivism. That's all you have. So the question is, how fast do we go, or do we collectivize healthcare first and then collectivize, groceries later, so on and so forth? Well, it's all rubbish. It's all horrible, and it's all destructive. So until we acknowledge, though, that our problems of today are caused by our movement toward collectivism over the past 125 years, we're not going to win anything. So what you have to do is you have to make that argument that it's government that's the problem. Government that's the problem. Government is the problem. That's how Ronald Reagan took a country that had gone incredibly far left after Watergate and was able to turn it around in election terms in just 4 years, in the span from 1976 to 1980 when he got elected, because he said repeatedly that government isn't the solution, government is the problem. Now, what the left does is they make the point all the time that selfish motives are a terrible thing. And we on the right say, no, selfish motives, Adam Smith, he told us what selfish motives do. They make things happen, and people in pursuing their selfish motives make things for other people and do things for other people and get paid for it. And that is how the system works. No, that is how the system is supposed to work. But that's not the way it works now. The system has been corrupted by cronyism. And cronyism is only possible when government has taken everything over. So we need to recognize that the real way forward is reform. We need to acknowledge that and embrace it. And this is the one thing about Donald Trump that people don't seem to understand, that he's not big government, small government. He's for winning. He's for reform. He's for big reform. And he may be wrong on many of the policies that he pursues, but his vision is reform. His vision is the destruction of the current system. And I've pointed that out before, that what Trump is really doing in his tariffs and so forth is destroying the current the global monetary system. Yes, that's good, because the current global monetary system is entirely corrupt, and it's been corrupt for many decades. It's been corrupt since probably a few days after the Bretton Woods agreement set it up in the late 1940s after World War II. So yeah, we can win this. Just go ahead and do it. Embrace reform. Acknowledge that this situation stinks. That's what I did. That's what I did in my housing affordability paper. I said, yeah, this situation stinks, but it's going to get better by its own nature, the way the situations always play out. But we can make it better in the meantime by not spending so much, not having the federal government spend so much more every doggone year. That will solve the problem.
So let's talk about Medicare for All. I just wrote a piece on this, and this is a very important subject because the Medicare for All program is mainstream. It's pretty popular among Americans, but there needs to be, like a very solid conversation about this. Most Americans do not like their health care. Why? The reason why your healthcare is tied to your job is because during World War II, FDR said that we're going to put price controls in place. Companies wanted to hire good workers. What did they do? They said, we're going to start offering you this thing called healthcare benefits. That just became part of the system. You could completely sever that relationship and make your healthcare totally portable. It just so happens that we're still in that system 80 years later. What happened in the 1960s? We had Medicare and we had Medicaid. How is that gone? I just checked. The Medicare trust fund is on the brink of insolvency. The Medicare trust fund currently serves 70 million Americans, those are over age 65 and those with disabilities. However, the spending for that has increased well beyond GDP the last decade or so. So how can you expand Medicare for all, meaning you're going to provide Medicare for all for 330 million Americans when you can't even cover the 70 million Americans that are currently on the program? And just to show how preposterous this is, did you know that 87% of Medicare recipients, including both of my parents who are on Medicare, remember, they paid into the system for all those years. Guess what? 87% have supplemental insurance, Medicare Advantage, Medigap, Medicare Part D, or Medicare Part C. So this notion that Medicare for all equals universal health care and that all your services are going to be paid by the government is a complete and utter farce. If you really wanted to go down that route, you know what you would call it? Probably Medicaid for all. But even that wouldn't come close because not all doctors accept Medicaid. Medicaid does not actually pay doctors the full price of services rendered. So this whole healthcare system, guys, what I'm trying to say is that it has been so gummed up by government interventions from, FDR in World War II to the Great Society when, Medicare and Medicaid are going to really solve the problem too. I remember about a decade ago when Obamacare was supposed to bend the cost curve. What happened? The utter opposite. So the simple solution to this is could not be more apparent here. If you gave all Americans the choice to choose their own healthcare, whatever it is, whether they want to do a direct primary care agreement or they want to go on a really high, maybe they're really young and in super shape like me, and you want to go on a high deductible healthcare plan. Although I had to have surgery on my damn shoulder, so that really sucked. So I know how bad the healthcare system is. I'll just tell you that. There could be infinite choices. That is the solution. One size fits all is not the solution. Consolidation, centralization, and a more Byzantine system is not the solution. But the DSA says we are going to provide healthcare for all, and we're going to tax millionaires and billionaires, and that's just going to make sure that you can have all the healthcare services that you want. But that's not true. It is fundamentally not true because there's going to be shortages. There's going to be rationing. Go look at what's happening in Canada right now. They have a healthcare for all system. Go look at what's happening in the UK. They have a Medicare for all system. What happens? Rationing, shortages. Healthcare for all is a total and utter farce. Nothing's free. What are you going to make the doctors, perform the surgery for nothing? I mean, this is a complete joke. So I just really wanted to kind of, do a deep dive on that. I mean, I wouldn't really consider this a deep dive, but, just like a quick history lesson. If you want to make things more affordable, like healthcare, get the government out of the way. Give people a vast array of choices. That is the solution. The DSA just doesn't get that because they are in this this just moronic mindset that if you say it's free, it's just going to become free. That's not the way real life works. These people are complete and utter morons.
Tell us how you really feel, Chris.
Oh, geez, I could go on.
We got our rant.
Well, we've got two more topics that I wanted to touch on within this section here. So the next one would be their answer to like big corporate overreach and stuff. Their solution, of course, is nationalize the industry, nationalize Google, because that would be more fair and balanced. And here at the Heartland Institute, we have some sympathy to say that some of these big tech companies are a bit out of control. we are still like, we still can't get monetized on this channel, not because we accidentally had a video that dropped 2 F-bombs in 5 seconds, but because we dared to talk a little bit skeptically about a little something called COVID-19 and the lockdowns, and because I one time drew a gun on stream, and because of all sorts of things that we talk about that big tech does not enjoy, especially because of our coverage of climate change. And like the World Economic Forum and stuff, they Google is not a big fan of you criticizing these things. So we certainly can empathize with the idea that some of these companies are a little bit out of control, especially when it comes to like Google, which is embedded in every service that you use at this point, and their main purpose, which is to be like a web browser, doesn't even work anymore because they forced AI stuff into it. So everything at these big companies is a little bit crazy. The censorship during the 2020 election cycle was, I don't think it would be wrong to say, unprecedented. All of these different social media companies, all these different major tech organizations were shutting people down left and right. They had, if you guys remember, like Gab and Parler, they couldn't even get like security service hosting for their websites and stuff, because all of these websites and services colluded to shut down conservative or like right wing or even far right thought on the internet within like a 2-year period. It just clamped down from a relatively free internet to something unrecognizable to what the internet used to be. So that is, it feels like, from especially from an outside perspective or from the perspective of someone who isn't aware of the government meddling in these issues, that these big companies have an outsized amount of control over our civil rights, and over like what we're able to even see. So the DSA's solution is, well, we nationalize it so the people own a share, kind of, because the government owns the company, because it's essential infrastructure or whatever. That's their proposal. And to me, that's an instant, that doesn't work, because the reason why Google and Facebook and Twitter and all of those companies were cracking down on right of center speech during that period was because it turns out, as we found out more and more over the last couple of months, the government was actively working to pressure them behind the scenes. So, of course, government, once again, was the reason why that stuff has been crazy in the first place. But Sam, some of people will say that some of these companies are too big. They're like almost monopolies at this point, a lot of these big tech companies. So what do we do? What's our solution to this? That's not, well, we should nationalize Google.
Well, what makes them too, first let's ask the question, what makes them too big? And who decides? First of all, I'm fine with the claim that these companies are too big and that many of the companies in many of the industries are too big. What made them so big? Why does this happen? And the answer is, they're big because the government likes that. And so tax and regulatory policies are put in place that somehow, by some great big accident, make these companies bigger and bigger, so that you have 5 companies, 3 companies, 2 companies, essentially 1 company that are entirely dominating a particular industry sector. Well, why does that happen? People suggest, you see my dog back there, people suggest that the reason is that these companies are greedy and they push out the competition. Well, yes, they are greedy and they push out the competition, but they do it by collaboration with government. It's called crony capitalism. So that's what's happening there. Now, the reason that you get this is because it's natural for people want to maximize their own power. So it's natural for people in businesses to want to maximize their market share. It's natural for people in government to want to maximize their say over things. But the asymmetrical warfare that I talked to you about earlier, it takes place here too. Because what the collectivists can say is that the government is ultimately good-natured and wants what's best for people because it is elected by the people. And businesses only want what's best for themselves. Both those statements are absolutely 100% false. But you don't win by going through an elaborate explanation of why they're false. Although the explanation is pretty simple. We have the whole, there's an economic explanation for this as to why government does this. And it's that there are incentives play out for people everywhere, regardless of whether they have government power behind them or not. And so people in government have incentives to increase their own power. So that's why that happens. The government is not in any way fundamentally benign or helpful. The government is, in fact, full of bad incentives. And in business, you cannot, without government assisting you, you cannot do evil successfully over time and take over an industry just by doing evil. You can't do it. The reason being that you have to serve customers or they won't give you their money. So you say, well, what about necessities? What about food? What about petroleum and so forth? Prices of petroleum went down when Rockefeller was taking over the industry. And the reason because that was the reason he was able to take over the industry is because he was able to cut prices. How dumb can you be not to recognize the directions of things? Well, people are told a lot of lies, but the big lie is that government is benign, that government wants what's best for people invariably, and that businesses can impose their evil will on everyone. That's the big lie. And again, the reform story is very simple. Our problems today are caused by a 125-year plus expansion of government power in cooperation with big business. We need to reform those things, and we can reform them. The only way to reform them, though, is to win politically. You don't get good policy unless you have good politics, unless you win politically. So let's get in there and win and do what needs to be done. I think that's the situation we're in at present. We don't have by any means anywhere near an ideal situation politically. But boy, oh boy, compared to 2021 and 2022, it's not even, it's ludicrous, the difference. And don't forget that in 2023 and 2024, things were starting to improve because the federal government could not agree among themselves between a Republican Congress and a far left collectivist Democrat president and his team, who were really running things apparently. They couldn't come to an agreement on raising taxes and raising spending and raising borrowing faster than they had already been doing. So it all slowed down and things got better. Private sector started to grow since 2025, January 2025. Private sector has been growing and government's been shrinking. Those are good things. So we're on the right path, but we have a long way to go down it. But the lesson is simple. All right? The lesson is simple. You have to win politically. The only way the people who believe in liberty and believe in individual rights are going to win politically is by embracing the reform mindset that says we don't have our rights to life, liberty, and property. We want them. You should want them. We're going to give them to you, and we're going to shrink the government and big business collaboration that have made things so difficult in your lives. And that The healthcare system is a preeminent example of that, where government runs the entire system and it ruins everything. And Chris mentioned Medicare and Medicaid. What did they do? They did accomplish one thing. They increased the demand for healthcare radically without doing anything to increase the supply of healthcare. And what does that do to prices? You all know. It raises them radically. So again, this collaboration between, I think that the use of the term elites is a good thing. This collaboration between two different areas of elite rule has really done extraordinary damage to this country. That's what we need to fix. Let's go for it and do it. You have to win in order to do it.
So, Lynette, you were talking about Google being a monopoly. I think Google is a monopoly, and I am pretty sympathetic to the big tech being a monopoly argument, because I go back to when Microsoft was accused of being in a monopoly in the mid 1990s, because what they did was they said, you have to use our product, Microsoft, Office. And that was unfair, because they're saying, even if you don't want to use a product, you have to use a product. Google and some of these other platforms that have, YouTube, that they own these multiple social media, arms, they are in fact monopolies. And I do think that they should be broken up. And I do think that the DSA is correct in pointing the finger at big tech and saying, wait a second, we do not want you to have this outsized power over the economy, whether it's because of social media or AI. So I actually do think that there is a place in the American policy discussion to say, are these companies too big? Do they wield too much power and influence? And they've shown us that they will use that unwieldy power and influence for ill means, and therefore they should pay the price for it. So I'm totally on the other side of this one.
Chris, if you haven't, and to anybody that hasn't read it already, I would highly recommend Senator Josh Hawley's book, The Tyranny of Big Tech. Fantastic book that talks about that.
Yep.
And then also, just to tack on, Sam, what you had said, I wanted to just throw that in there, was talking about the way that we are to want to preserve, wanting to bring life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that, I think, is the scariest part about what we've been talking about and the socialist movement, is that they don't want you to have that. These people do not want U.S. citizens to have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They want you to be a slave and a dependency, or having a dependency to the state. And so I just wanted to throw that out there.
You make a great point, and healthcare is a perfect example. The way the system's built, and Chris pointed out that during World War II, a time when the government was taking over everything for emergency reasons. These things happen during emergencies somehow. Anyway, during World War II, we had this change that made healthcare provided by the employer, health insurance, untaxed. So this again, it's the doggone rules, regulations, and taxation. That system creates all these ills. You have to get rid of that system. And as you point out, healthcare is a perfect example of this. And so but you have to win politically to do these things, and then you have to act on it.
But you also have to be very frank in your framing, because I think framing is so important. The DSA is good at framing free healthcare. What we have to say is, do you want to be told what kind of healthcare you're going to get? Do you want to be told by the government where you're going to live? Do you want to be told, or do you want to have the choice, the freedom, the liberty, the agency, the autonomy? I think that most Americans, by far most Americans, including most young Americans, if you frame it like that, do you want to be told what you're going to do, or do you want to have choices as in your life? people love choices. They love freedom. They love liberty. But with that comes also a bit of insecurity, I guess is one way to put it. So what the DSA is saying, we'll provide total security. It'll be a cradle to the grave entitlement and welfare state, and you're going to have nothing to ever worry about. However, there's a dark side to that. Go watch The Life of Julia from the Obama years, where Julia wakes up and she goes, and gets her, her free healthcare clinic, and then does this and goes on her free bus, and everything's free and everything's hunky dory. And Julia just like lives the best life ever. No, she doesn't. It's totally unfulfilling. It's totally unsatisfying. There's no challenges. Everything's just kind of given there. Go look at how lack of innovation, the lack of innovation that it entirely encompasses a society that takes on that attitude. There's no reason, there's no incentive, there's no desire to say, I'm going to go and really work hard and try this new thing and build this new invention or build this new product, because there's no point to it. That's what we need to tell these kids. That's what we need to, and that's why I tried to tell them, do you want to have choices or do you want to be told what to do? Most kids don't want to be told what to do. They want to have choices. Most people don't want to be told what to do. They want to have choices. They want to have freedom. Freedom is the default condition of humanity. It took us thousands, tens of thousands of years to actually bring that, into a governing society. And for us to throw it away after 250 years would just be the dumbest thing I can possibly imagine.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for them.
I knew you'd get it. I knew you'd find the right one.
The collectivists call what they do freedom. So, and you have to go back to Orwell in 1984 to understand all that.
That's doublespeak. There's no freedom.
Yes, absolutely.
There's no freedom in communism.
Right, of course. But I think the important point, though, is to remember there's only two paths. There's individual rights or collectivism. And we need to hit that we're the ones who are talking about individual rights. We're the ones who are acting on it. Our policies go in that direction. The others, those policies go toward your enslavement. If you want that, then I can't blame you for voting for it.
Going back to what Silas said, it sounds, I think you really identified probably, I think, the key to all of this: emotions and empathy. That really boils down to, do you want to do things that are going to be better for everybody? However, it's going to make some people are going to be extremely wealthy and successful and others aren't. Or do you want to have this like lowest common denominator where everyone just kind of has the basics?
Mm-hmm.
That's what this really boils down to.
It all went downhill when the damn kids stopped keeping score in sports.
God, tell me about it.
All right.
Soon as they made soccer matches unscored, that was the
It was the end. The beginning of
nobody's out until you get a hit in baseball and just ruined America.
As the Soviets used to say, it is no coincidence.
So we were going to talk about public infrastructure as well, but we'll talk about that another time, actually, because I want to get into our USA at 250 concepts here in the last 7 minutes of our show or so. But I'm really glad that we got to talk over the Medicare issue and also the big tech issue, because those are things that are important and they're going to keep coming up. And one of these days we'll get Donald back in here to talk about AI because that's been heating up even more.
You sure about that?
If he's not too busy to come on our show. So we'll do that. But I want to talk briefly about 1776 for a minute here. But the last 2 weeks of 1776, since we didn't have the show last week, was not, there's a lot going on, but it's much like the last few weeks where there's a lot going on involved in preparing for the pending attack on New York City by the British, and the dissemination of the Declaration, which was officially signed by the rest of the delegates the first week of August. So this week, though, the Declaration actually reached London, and and it was not largely received very well. There was pretty staggering amounts of misinformation and censorship. Some London newspapers censored all of the times in the declaration that King George was named specifically and directly accused of misconduct. They would put in his place either like a generalized term like the British or something like that, or they or something like that, or even just a dash to just censor out the name, because they thought it would really upset people if they found out that that King George's conduct specifically was the cause of this revolution. So there's a book that came out this spring about the news coverage of the Declaration called When the Declaration of Independence Was News by Emily Sneff. Reason.com covered it, and I'm going to read a little bit from their coverage. They wrote, several London newspapers assumed that the Declaration of Independence itself was an absurd and nefarious plot planned in France or Spain. So guys, this stuff, the conspiracy stuff is absolutely not new. The more you read in history, the more you realize that absolutely nothing changes ever, and that we are exactly the same people as lived 250 years ago. So the Gazetteer and the New Daily Advertiser reported that when the Congress resolved upon independence, there were present several foreigners of different nations, amongst whom were some persons of distinction from the courts of Versailles and Madrid. It also fantasized that as soon as the colonies declared themselves independent states, 2 foreign vessels, which were at Philadelphia, slipped their cables and sailed with intelligence to the above courts. The Morning Chronicle claims that the Continental Congress President John Hancock had been duped by the arch-rebel and crafty pettifogger Samuel Adams. Other London newspapers disputed the specified grievances in the Declaration. In a reply to the Declaration of the Representatives of the Disunited States in America in Congress assembled, published in the Morning Post by someone under a pseudonym, argued, in Sneff's words, that the British colonists were a people who were made to be subdued. They had no sovereignty or authority, and they had turned against the king whose character was great and merciful and not tyrannical. So yeah, crafty pettifogger is a great term. So after hearing a little bit about this particular essay, I thought, well, surely this is online somewhere because everything is online now. And it is. And I read it, and it's a novella length essay. I have no idea how they were publishing these things in the newspapers. I think probably it was like a pamphlet rather than a newspaper article because, well, for one, it's positively dripping with contempt. And it addresses one by one every major claim of the Declaration. And it is a fascinating read. It reads a lot like what you'll find if you hit the expand button on X or something, and someone has gone on Facebook or on X or on social media somewhere and like responded to someone's argument sentence by sentence. It's amazing. So I want to read a little bit about it because it's quite funny, actually. So to Article 4 of the Declaration, which complained that the king called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. This is what the pseudonymous author of the novella-length essay seethes. This is what he writes in reaction to Article 4. There is something so truly ridiculous in this article that it is hardly possible to answer it with any becoming gravity. At first blush, it looks as if it was inserted by an enemy, as if intended to throw an air of ridicule on the Declaration in general, among reasons to justify a national revolt, and to find it gravely alleged that the members of an assembly happened once upon a time to be straightened in their apartments and compelled to sit on strange seats and to sleep in strange beds is, I believe, unexampled in the history of mankind. Sickly and feeble must be the constitution of the patriotism which these hardships, dreadful as they are, could fatigue into a compliance with unpatriotic measures. All right, so as you can see, there's not a whole lot of empathy overseas there. I love it. I love this glimpse into the perspectives of our disconnected opponents abroad. And so I'll read the title of the essay again. It's called A Reply to the Declaration of the Representatives of the Disunited States in America. Fascinating. stuff. Don't use Brave to look for it, because for some reason Brave can't find it. Unfortunately, Google is the one that you have to use. Google Chrome is the one that you have to.
No, God!
Yeah, for some reason Brave wants to give you like modern day political articles, even if you put search modifiers around it, which is a complaint of mine about modern web browsers for another show. But yeah, so guys, I just, it's so fascinating to me how little things change.
When you said that comment, that just made me think that even back in the late 1700s, there was a lot of political animosity and a lot of mudslinging, and there were duels. So when we talk about, oh my gosh, did you see what senator said about that, or representative said about that? It's like, do you know that they were actually take pistols and go and kill each other like a couple hundred years ago? So I always just, it's just a funny little thing, but.
I just love this guy who wrote, whoever it is that wrote this article or this essay, is completely disconnected. Like, he doesn't know what's going on in the colonies necessarily. I mean, I imagine he's probably a member of parliament or something, not sure. But, he's saying that the complaint from the colonists that the king would, have our legislative bodies meet like far away from where they're actually from and stuff, and fatiguing them into compliance or whatever. That certainly was something that was going on that the colonists felt was unfair. And to this guy who is across the ocean, who knows if he's even set foot in the colonies before, reading this from his perspective, this is a major complaint, the fourth complaint in the Declaration. Him taking this as like evidence that we're a bunch of whiners is really funny to me, because I can see where he's coming from on that, considering he has no concept whatsoever of what's going on in the colonies and the distances that we're talking about compared to England itself. It's amazing stuff.
Well, just goes to show that fake news was also around 250 years ago. I didn't know CNN was that historic. Wow.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the guys that go around like in random cities and they just start creating issues with people, and then when they get confronted by the police, they just start, yeah, I'm a law scholar, and they don't know what they're talking about, but they're so convinced like they have the knowledge to talk on these topics and get out of it.
Yeah, I strongly recommend this essay. Because it's, for one, from our perspective as Americans, it's not a perspective that we hear about when it comes to our history, and it is very enlightening to see, like, through the lens of someone else, someone part of the empire proper, who thought that it was all ridiculous and that our complaints were petty and silly. It's cool. It's quite crazy. And that's not the only thing he has to say about that. He goes into like wall of text explanations as to why everything the king did was necessary or reasonable or whatever. And it's quite fascinating. I guess that's the music telling me that we're gonna stop. Are you sure, Sam, that you don't have anything to say about newspaper coverage in 1776?
Oh, actually, I do. I'll be as brief as possible. But I do think it's interesting that people are always people. They're always human. They look at things from their own perspective and will defend their beliefs to the ends of the earth. That somehow, because I have this premise that the king is right, everything is going to affirm that. And so you have your wonderful confirmation bias and build an enormous argument based on that. Things never change. It's always been that way. It's probably always going to be that way. And it's a good lesson to us to look back at history and recognize that there is such a thing as human nature. There are elements of the human condition that are immutable, and we need to acknowledge them and respect them if we're going to have any success in the world, either in individual terms or in policy terms.
Absolutely. So that is all the time we have, unfortunately, today. Thank you, everyone, for your attention to these matters. We are live every week on Thursdays at noon Central on Rumble, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. Chris, what have you got for our audience today?
Heartland.
Your mic totally cut out. I think you might have unplugged your microphone with your elbow.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Just go and check out heartland.org. We got a bunch of really good opinion articles up there.
Absolutely. Sam?
We certainly do. Go to heartland.org and also to stkarnick.substack.com.
Thank you very much. And also, Silas, our intern national man of mystery, please tell us what you have for the audience. Do you have a social media somewhere you want people to follow, or what?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram or Twitter. You look up Generation Crusade on Instagram. That's my primary political account. And appreciate you guys having me on. 3 things is fight socialism, read books, and homeschool your kids. Thanks.
Perfect.
Read
All
books.
right. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's terrific. All right, guys. None of you are pettifoggers. So I'm sorry that you even had to hear that language said about our great hero, Sam Adams. So for audio listeners, please rate us well on whatever service you're using and leave us a review. Thank you so much to all of our usual panelists and also Silas for joining us on screen today. And of course, to our viewers, we will see you again next week.
You fellas been doing a bit of boozing, have you? Sucking back on Grandpa's old cough medicine?